You are watching part 2 of the full series of Java Spring Boot interview questions. These are the 5 questions we are going to discuss in this session. What is the default port number for a Spring Boot application? How can you enable the auto-configuration feature in Spring Boot? Explain the concept of starters in Spring Boot. How does Spring Boot handle external configuration? What is the purpose of the application.properties or application.yml file? First question, what is the default port number for a Spring Boot application? The default port number for a Spring Boot application is 8080. However, you can change it by specifying the desired port number. In the application's configuration file, example, application.properties or application.yml, using the property server.port.
Second question, how can you enable the auto-configuration feature in Spring Boot? Auto-configuration is enabled by default in Spring Boot. It leverages the class path and the defined dependencies to automatically configure the application. Spring Boot analyzes the dependencies and uses their presence to configure various components such as data sources, web servers, and messaging systems. If needed, you can disable specific auto-configuration classes or customize the configuration by providing your own beans. Third question, explain the concept of starters in Spring Boot. Starters in Spring Boot are a set of dependencies that make it easier to configure and use specific features or technologies in an application. They encapsulate the required dependencies and configurations, allowing developers to add them to their projects with minimal effort. For example, the Spring Boot Starter Web Starter includes all the necessary dependencies for building web applications, including the Spring MVC framework, embedded web server, and JSON support. Next question, how does Spring Boot handle external configuration? Spring Boot provides multiple ways to handle external configurations. It supports property files, application.properties or application.yml, that can be placed in various locations including the class path, file system, or external directories. Spring Boot also supports environment variables, command line arguments, and the use of profiles for different deployment environments. The configuration values can be accessed using the @value annotation or by binding them to Java objects using the @configuration properties annotation. Next question, what is the purpose of the application.properties or application.yml file? The application.properties or application.yml file is used for external configuration in a Spring Boot application. It allows developers to specify various properties and their values to configure the application. These properties can control various aspects of the application such as server port, database connection details, logging configuration, and much more. The properties file can be placed in the class path or other predefined locations, and Spring Boot will automatically load and apply the configuration during application startup. Hope you have learned something and feel confident to answer the questions we discussed so far. Here's the list of questions that will be discussed in the next session. Please check out our playlist for more questions and subscribe our channel for updates and notifications. Good luck for your upcoming interviews.